What's on the radio, man?
All right, everyone, welcome back. This is Corey.
And this is Dave.
Oh, and this is Scott. Praise Satan.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. So, for those of you who may just be joining us for the first time or only joining us recently, quick recap on what we've been doing here. So, we have for several weeks now been taking random albums from the Rolling Stones list of top 500 albums of all time, pitting them against one another in a playoff-style bracket, and ultimately trying to get to our determination of what we think of the best album of all time. We started originally with 128 albums, but then we decided to mix it up a little bit more. We went back to some older shows before we started the playoffs and took some of those older albums that we had talked about but not actually pit against one another. We're now actually coming close to the end of that process. So today we are going to be doing 4 rounds, 8 albums total, head-to-head. Winner moves on. Winner can go suck it. And I think you guys understand where we are from here.
There you have it.
We're gonna, yeah. Well, I'll just leave that alone.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're drinking urine again. I saw that.
I am, clearly.
Okay, so let's go into the first round.
Better than Zima.
Anything's better than Zima.
Led Zeppelin is back with what is considered their greatest achievement, the monolithic 4th album that really had no title. Stairway Heaven is all you really need to know. Going against Led Zeppelin are the Beatles with their second soundtrack album, Help, with more hits than you get off a standard spliff. Well, not only rolled by Keith Richards or Bob Marley, and this has been scientifically proven, in case you're wondering. Also, beware that the Beatles are in 5 of the next 8 rounds that we will cover.
Yeah, so back to my quick recap. A couple of these shows where we went back and pulled some of these albums from, we focused in on acts that had 5 or more albums on the Rolling Stone list, and now that has led us to a place where now we're talking about the same artist over and over again. So you're going to be hearing a lot of Beatles today, a lot of other artists. Trust me, it will get filtered out as we work our way through this, but if you're wondering why we're covering so many Beatles albums, so many Neil Young albums, so many Bob Dylan albums, that's the reason why.
We will be beating on the Beatles.
You can hear our extended thoughts on both of these albums.
Of course.
Check out Season 1, Episode 5 for Led Zeppelin 4, or Season 1, Episode 4 for Help. And maybe not those albums specifically, but definitely those artists.
Let's get underway and start pitting these two against one another.
So let's begin with Led Zeppelin, the 4th album.
The Led Zeppelin album, but to a lot of people.
Yeah, this is stellar. I mean, everyone calls it Led Zeppelin 4. I mean, they put an IV there, but it's really not. Didn't have a title, and the only thing that was on there were 4 symbols.
Right.
And not symbols like the things that are on a drum kit, but symbols like they literally created little icons to represent each one of the band members.
The ever infamous Jimmy Page Zoso.
Yes.
He's the only one that like made up, or I think Robert Plant's was one that he created.
Yes.
That came from some older mythical thing with the circle and the feather.
Yeah, Plant took his as a writer. The other two, who knows?
But yeah, I mean, that's just one more example, though, of the fact that they just decided to leave their name off the album cover altogether. This is one more example of, this is the album where they really started trying to do something really new. And even though they were wildly successful, they're like, let's just blow up the model and try to come up with new sounds, a new approach. So no name on the album. There was not only a name, there wasn't even a name on the spine, I don't believe. So like some of the old LPs, you actually have the name written down the spine like the side of a book. I don't think they even have that on this. Just everything was on the table to change up at this point.
The songs have stood the test of time.
Oh, yeah.
You got Black Dog, you got Rock and Roll. Of course, you've got Stairway to Heaven.
Battle of Evermore.
Misty Mountain, Going to California, When the Levee Breaks. Just everything was a hit. Yeah, everything on this album worked.
Yeah, I actually had in my notes that basically this was their Fleetwood Mac rumors. Like, if you only know a couple of Zeppelin songs, odds are they came off of this album.
Yeah, exactly. Just about everybody knows Rock and Roll.
Oh, yeah.
Or Stairway.
Or Stairway. And it's one of those times where we talk about really long songs.
Yeah.
7 minutes, 55 seconds?
Yeah.
It actually works.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You don't feel like you were dragged through the mud or like taken on a long fucking epic prog journey.
Right.
Prog journey. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like one of those fucking Dream Theater 20-minute bullshits. A bunch of guitar noodling. No, this every note in Stairway was correct. It was like, oh, yeah, the song wouldn't have been right without something missing.
Exactly. Yeah, we've said on prior episodes that there's nothing wrong with a long song, but if you do it, you better make it worth a while for the listener, and it definitely does here.
Oh, and if you think I'm ragging on Dream Theater, I'm really not. I love those guys, but goddamn, they play they get a little crazy.
They do noodle a little, but
oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, Portnoy's a fucking amazing drummer.
Yeah, well, then there's Liquid Tension Experiment, which was John Petrucci and the keyboardist, I forget his name, and the new drummer.
Well, you told me about this, but I've forgotten.
Yeah. Worth listening to sometime if you like the noodles.
Well, so speaking of drummers, though, I mean, another thing we've talked about in prior shows is don't put a drum solo on your album, because you can't really appreciate a drum solo unless you're seeing it played live, so you can see the complexity of what the drummer's doing. Most people can't appreciate it. Rock and roll is about that is the high mark of how you showcase a drummer on an album.
Oh yeah.
That is, it's not a long ass drum solo per se. I mean, there's a couple little breaks in there where it's just the drummer, but it is clearly that in that particular track, the drummer is doing 90% of the work.
It's such a brilliant drum part
from the opening.
Yeah.
It's like you recognize the song from the drum line.
You hear that snare hit, and you're just like, oh, yep, that's rock and roll.
Yeah, we were talking about a Stones album a couple shows ago, and I said there was this weird thing that happened in the studio where for some reason the hi-hat was the loudest thing you heard, and I made the comment that generally speaking, the hi-hat should never be the loudest thing you hear on a drum kit. Rock and Roll is one of the rare songs where the hi-hat should definitely be the loudest thing you hear on the track, because that is just an iconic little rhythm that he's playing on that hi-hat and snare together at the beginning.
Well, he's also got like a little shuffle going on the snare. So, I mean, it just works. And even that final solo, it's musical, and even in the way it's done. It fits. It's like it was written as music. You could see the notes, you can just feel it, and that solo at the end is It is part of that song. It wouldn't be that song without it.
No. No, really musically, everything on this album is just kind of perfect. And I hate to sound like a total fanboy here, but whatever.
We've come across perfect albums, and this is one of them.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, there's a reason that this stuff makes the Rolling Stone Top 500 list. None of these are bad albums per se. So, but I don't know. Can we come up with anything negative about it though? If we're trying to be fair here.
I mean, there was the whole controversy with Stairway and that Taurus song, or the song Taurus by Spirit, and I played it at least like 15 times, and I went, it might be like 2 or 3 notes, but it is not plagiarized.
No.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, Jimmy Page lifted a lot from a lot of the blues artists, old blues artists, but I always felt like he wasn't necessarily plagiarizing as much as he was paying real homage to the people that influenced him. I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Oh yeah, I don't think it was plagiarized.
Yeah, but that at the same time, I mean, you're right that he was trying to pay in tribute, and if you compare, I think you had in your notes, Corey, if you compare this to Oh Well by Fleetwood Mac, this is one of these instances where Page has actually admitted to sort of doing a little bit of a lift from something he heard from another artist. And I think, to your point, I think some of that is inevitable, right? Most people that play music started because they heard something else they liked. And it's sort of, there's only so far you can go really without taking those influences and sort of adopting them for yourself.
That's true.
Right. And I mean, sometimes it does happen where you're like, oh, this does sound like that song. Yeah, I might have heard that. It got stuck in, my brain. The only time I go, yeah, straight out plagiarism, we go right back to Vanilla Ice.
Yeah,
do we though? God.
Yeah, there's only so many patterns of notes and chords that sound well together. So eventually, on a certain level, there's nothing new under the sun anymore, unless you start getting into some really weird scales that aren't very common. But
with the chromatic scales, and that doesn't exactly sit well.
yeah,
But yeah, with like the "Oh Well" by Fleetwood Mac, that call and response. But we can go back to Ray Charles doing a call and response.
oh yeah,
Oh
exactly.
yeah. No, call and response goes all the way back to the
back to
20s
gospel
and
and
30s. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it was just the way they did it with the guitar and the singing, but
Yes.
it's still basically the same thing. And what's funny is that's what I thought of when I was listening to Black Dog. I was like, it kind of reminds me of this Fleetwood Mac song. And then when I'm doing my research, it's right there in Wikipedia. I'm like, oh, well, there's so much for an original idea.
I can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin. But don't ask me what I think of you. I might not give the answers that you want me to.
Treat me wrong. Come and love you, daddy, all night long. All right now. Hey, hey. All right.
Yeah, well. You're allowed to have original ideas, but when it comes to Led Zeppelin 4, probably not.
No, I'm sure someone got there before any of
Dude,
us.
Of course.
This album is kind of like Dark Side of the Moon in that sense.
No, yeah, you're not wrong. And of course, if we really want to make a big reach, when the levee breaks can be a bit too long, but then again,
Yeah.
it works. 7 minutes.
To me, the harmonica on that is somewhat atmospheric because it's got that reverb and it just kind of swirls and echoes and just drives the song out. It's beautiful. I mean, it works so well, and nothing else could really. I don't think.
Yeah, I didn't get my harmonica sensitivity alarm did not go off.
No, that's one song where it never gets. Yeah, it's like, okay, that belongs there. That works. It's not like fucking Dylan whipping it out every goddamn second.
Here, let me play you my harmonica.
No,
He meant whipping out his harmonica.
Yes.
well, whatever works. Yeah, blow on my little harmonica, girl.
Let me show you my circumcised harmonica.
All I can think of is Blazing Saddle. Excuse me while I whip this out.
Oh,
Okay, I think
yeah.
All right, we've gone on and on about Zeppelin 4, so let's move on to the Beatles.
The Beatles.
Yeah.
Help! Sorry.
So Corey, you said it in the intro. Lots of hits. I mean, you had Yesterday, Ticket to Ride, I've Just Seen a Face, Agnash. There's so many songs on this that are still considered classics today.
Oh yeah.
Yesterday is the most covered song
It is.
ever. The most. To where I love the song, but it's one of those where when it comes on, you have to be in a mood for it.
Oh yeah.
Because we want to talk about overplayed songs. I think that would probably be the top of the list.
I don't know that I've ever heard a cover of it that I liked, actually.
I can't think of one either.
I've heard it covered 1,000 times, and it's never as good as the original. No, not never even close, frankly.
You're right.
I don't mind a good cover if it's taking a song and like improving on it somehow or innovating with it somehow, but I've never heard a good Yesterday cover.
Right, or deconstructing it and then reconstructing it. But yes,
Yeah.
no, there's not. It doesn't exist.
No.
And I think that this is one of those songs that just forever remains perfect in and of itself. I would say, Fleetwood Mac's The Chain. I've never heard a cover. Well, no, I take that back. The Highway Women. The Highway Women. Is
The
that
High
what you were gonna
Women.
say?
The High Women. Oh,
High Women.
there's also a band called Cobra and the Lotus They did a version of it, and it's okay. It's not the best. The Highwomen are very good. I love their stuff, but yeah.
But the Highwomen worked because they deconstructed it.
Yes.
They made it more vocal,
Right.
tamed it down, and that's where it worked. But with Yesterday, like Dave just said, I've not heard a cover. I went, wow, this is really good, and I remember it.
Right. No, with Yesterday, no, I've never heard a cover that has stood out to me.
It's a timeless piece.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, they're going to be playing it 100, 200 years from now.
To me, it's also one of those songs that really kind of captures Paul singing at his very, very best.
Yes, I agree.
The emotion, everything.
Absolutely perfect.
Ticket to Ride, I noted, this is where you can really start to feel the transition of where they're moving on to before Rubber Soul. It's got a whole different kind of progression. It's got different sounds in it to where, it's kind of that, okay, we have the Beatlemania. It kind of feels like that, but we're going to do things a little differently. I mean, even like some of the drum fills and the way they constructed that song.
So let's look at the low points here. So first of all, track on here called I Need You. It was the first time they were experimenting with a guitar volume pedal. A volume pedal in a guitar is sort of like a precursor to the wah-wah pedal, but you can, if you use it right, you can sort of get these swells where the guitar kind of fades in, fades out, and sounds a little bit more like a synth than a guitar. They actually, as I understand, because they were so new and not used to this, they actually had George Harrison playing, and John Lennon was sitting on the floor, tilting the pedal with his bare hands, because Harrison hadn't mastered the whole using his foot to control the dynamic. It's sort of this early indication of what we would see later from the Beatles with experimenting with new sounds, new technologies, but it didn't really work, frankly. I guess I just kept thinking, who was the guy in the background playing the car horn? Because that was all I heard over and over again.
The cover, they're standing like semaphore, but they're not spelling help.
Yeah, I actually like the cover, but yeah, the original idea was for them to spell out the word help, like holding their arms in semaphore with the semaphore flags. And then the photographer got there and they did it, and he's like, yeah, I don't like the way that looks. And he just kind of had them reposition their arms into something he liked. And so instead of HELP, it spells out NVUJ.
So yeah, Scott, that helps your confusion with why you think there was an O in help.
Naturally, because I am the O in help. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, no, we can spell out help. I'll be the O.
Now there is this famous piece of like urban legend that for a while people were believing that Paul McCartney had died and had been replaced with like a lookalike singer. So as part of the theory, that once fans figured out that they were spelling out NVUJ instead of HELP, they took that as code for new vocalist unknown James. Because Paul McCartney's first name is actually James. It's James Paul McCartney.
Wow.
But you know what? That's a controversy I can live with. Compared to everything else we have nowadays, I'll be like, yeah, you know what? I can run with this. I'm not going to believe it, but that doesn't bother me.
I'd rather believe that than anything that is current.
Yes.
It is ironic that for all the Paul is dead rumors that were going around in the 60s, that now here in 2022, he's one of the only two still around.
Right. Yeah. Isn't that ironic?
Yes.
Don't you think? Yeah, I really do think. So.
And this is not, I mean, this is a solid album, but the other thing is, like, this is still early Beatles. This is not peak Beatles. That's not so much of a criticism, but it's just, if you're looking for reasons why this is not the greatest album in the world, well, because they really hadn't come into their own yet. It's good, but it's not. We're not talking peak Beatles at this point.
Peak Beatles.
All right, I think we can move on to the voting.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm first. I do love my Beatles. I do love this album, but Zeppelin 4 is just fucking perfect. So, Zepp. Scott?
Yeah, Zeppelin 4 is such a beast, so Zepp.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, if it was up against a different Beatles album,
right,
this might be a little tougher, but not this one.
It could be very tough had it been a different album.
I would agree. All right, well, that ends that round. So this discussion's about sellouts and what that really means, and it was, once again, Gene Simmons kicking us off. Yet again.
Gene, you
I guess
no cunt.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Gene was apparently quoted in an interview, I forget where the interview was, basically saying that, yeah, we sell out. Of course we sell out. We sell out every single night, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That was sort of the gist of the quote. And so we thought we'd get together and talk about that. Like, what does it mean to sell out? Is there a point where selling out is ethical? So I'll throw it open, guys, and if you want to start, have any thoughts on
Yeah, I
that.
mean, what did you get into music for? Was it not to make any money and not to
Right.
have success? Of course you got in to make money and have success, hopefully. And if you did, then, so you sold a bunch of merchandise with your band's name on it. How is that selling out exactly?
Isn't that secondary? Didn't you pick up an instrument first to get laid?
Well, a lot of us did, yeah.
Let's be honest here.
Never quite worked for me.
I
but
mean,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it worked or not, that was still kind of the underlying goal.
But I mean, I think take Scott's point. I think on some level you're right. I mean, it's first of all, it is extremely hard to make money in any form of the arts. And like when somebody's actually successful and figures out a way to do it, why do we suddenly get pissy because they find a way to make a few extra bucks?
Yeah, how come?
Like, shouldn't we want artists to make a living?
Well, then you turn around and you go, oh my God, why are people spending millions to hear Justin Bieber? What makes him so fucking great? Absolutely nothing in particular, but somebody hit the right notes with a chord. Was it Dr. Luke or whoever the fuck found him or some shit? I don't know. Anyway, things like that.
But but he's a fad.
Yeah, inexplicable fads.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, he's a pretty lasting fad at this point.
Talk to me when he's Britney Spears level.
What level is that?
Britney Spears level.
I guess
Britney.
she's her own level. Okay.
She has her own Vegas show, come on.
Okay, I can name a Britney song. I can't name a Bieber song.
Me either.
Well, I can't either, but that's largely by choice,
Yeah, it's
honestly.
mostly by choice.
No,
yeah.
but at least Britney was, I guess it was still the 90s. But she was at least still visible. I think back to when we grew up, it was the 70s and 80s. So to get on the radio, you had to have some sort of talent, or at least a really good in with the DJs to have your music heard. And of course, MTV was the next big thing, and you had to have the good visual, and that's how you got on there, and that's how we became familiar with music.
A lot of them, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we know the songs we grew up with intricately. They're embedded in our brains. They're just there. But they had to have at least some level of musicianship, some level of creativity, some higher level to get there. Yeah, there's plenty of songs we grew up with. Go, God, that's a shitty song. We don't like it, but if we actually sat down and looked at it, be like, well, yeah, it is well written. It is, the lyrics aren't that horrible, but
Freebird comes to mind. It's like, God, I hate that song, but that's only because I've heard it 10,000 times. Musically, it's fantastic. Lyrically, it's well done.
Okay.
Those guys didn't sit down and go, lads, we're gonna write us a song called Freebird, and we're gonna put that name on some condoms and some chips, and we're gonna sell it. They didn't think about that.
But you just made a good point. When a song gets played 10,000 times, people call that a sellout too. That's not the artist's fault, is it?
No.
The song's popular and connects with a lot of people and gets played a lot.
Right.
To the point that most of us go, turn this shit off.
Yeah. I actively turn off the radio just about any time I hear it now. But back in the day,
I actually went and copied and pasted Gene's full quote on this because I found another article where he elaborated a little bit more. I think to some degree it got taken out of context. I think first of all, I will say this. Whether you agree with Gene Simmons on this or not, he is nothing if not bluntly honest. I mean, he's always been very transparent about, I'm doing this to make money, and I'm going to make as much money as I can, and that's just that. So he's not telling us anything we didn't already know about himself personally or Kiss generally. It really kind of comes out in the full quote, which I think captures a lot of things you guys are saying. So here's what he said in full. Whether you're a writer or a painter or a musician or a sculptor, either you're doing it for yourself or other people. If the two meet, you like what you're doing and they like what you're doing, you're really happy. But often it's a hard choice. You're going to say, I like it, I don't care if anybody else likes it. Or the guy who does it all for the people, even though he might hate it, which in my opinion is just as valid and just as ethical as anything else. Imagine going to a restaurant and there's a chef there who is world famous and he personally hates spinach, wouldn't touch it if he gags. And you walk up to the chef and say, can you make me a spinach omelet? The chef would say, of course. and he makes you the thing, and you eat it. He doesn't have to like it. His job is to give you exactly what you want, even though he hates it, and that's ethical. You do the best you can, you do the work, and so I think that's perfectly valid. People say to me, you sell out. You're damn right, bitch. I sell out every night. And people latched on to like those last two sentences, but when you hear the whole thing in context, you kind of go, he's kind of got a fucking point.
No, he's got a very good point. I completely agree with Gene for once.
Well, think about all the artists that have songs that they've come to hate.
Sure.
And they still have to play them every fucking night. They'd rather show up and play other stuff from their catalog, but people came for that one song.
And they have to do an encore of that one fucking song. And they're just like, yay, here we go
It's
again.
like when people leave the doctor without a prescription. They're like, oh my God, I went to the show and they didn't play that song.
Right.
Yeah,
Greetings and salutations. This is Post-Production Corey. The centerpiece you've been listening to about selling out has been cut short. Come back next time for the rest of this discussion. And now, I return you back to the show. Already in progress. Let's move on.
Moving on.
Bruce Springsteen returns with his fourth studio album, Darkness on the Edge of Town, another stellar outing of master lyricism, going against Neil Young's After the Gold Rush, one of Neil's top-ranking albums in the Rolling Stone Top 500 list, with songs intended for a film that never came to fruition, that was actually called After the Gold Rush, and deemed as a sort of end-of-the-world movie. Long before audiences were ready for colliding asteroids, unfettered pandemics, loose dinosaurs, and zombie outbreaks. I'm sure it would have been as uplifting as other movies from that year, 1970, Love Story, Ned Kelly, starring Mick Jagger, and Jodorowsky's El Topo. These two albums are ranked right beside one another, so don't touch that dial because it's going to get fun around here. If you want to hear our extended discussions on these albums, check out Season 1, Episode 5 for Bruce Springsteen, and Season 1, Episode 4 for Neil Young. And let's begin with Bruce.
So interestingly, when this album came out, I was not turned on to it at that point. It was 1978, I think. This was, when I sat down to listen to this, my assumption based on what I was hearing was this was pre-Born to Run Bruce Springsteen. This is still when he's sort of like getting closer to figuring out the Springsteen sound, but not quite there yet. And much to my surprise, I found out this is actually the follow-up to Born to Run.
Yeah, right after it.
It is so, it's really hard to wrap your head around because it is so different than what he had just, this massive album that he just sold millions and millions of copies of. It's darker. It's a lot more emotional and raw than anything on Born to Run was. I think when I was doing some reading about it, somebody wrote that like Born to Run was a fun place everybody wanted to go to. Darkness on the Edge of Town was when you got there and found out it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. And apparently a lot of this had to do with the fact that after Born to Run, as unfortunately what tends to happen when an artist does something that makes a lot of money, everybody wants their piece of it. So there was a lot of protracted litigation with trying to get rid of his old management, trying the record company, how much they were going to split this Born to Run profits. And it left Bruce with kind of a sour taste in his mouth. And that's what kind of informed the darker sound on this album.
Yeah, it is kind of a trend where all of a sudden these artists are now learning that their managers are just screwing them. Mm-hmm. Not just management, but the label and everybody else. And, you know, you're so hungry to finally get that first gig, to get that signing, and you'll do just about anything and then realize you read the small print.
Well, then you don't have any leverage at that point. Right.
And you couldn't afford a lawyer in the first place to go over it with you.
Correct. You're just like you said, you're just so hungry to get out there, and the record company has you over a barrel because you simply, at this point in time anyway, it's gotten a little bit easier to do it today, although not incredibly easier. But at this point in time, if you didn't have the backing of a label, you were not going to break through, period.
No, labels were the gatekeepers to music.
At the same time, a label was taking a risk on an artist.
Yeah.
They could see that you could be great, but you may not connect with listeners, or you do. And sometimes they're surprised. You know, Clive Davis had that ear for it.
Absolutely. This is classic Springsteen insofar as, once again, you are seeing his very literary lyric writing style, creating characters, setting up entire stories in a song. In this case, stories with sort of a darker shade. This is almost more like Nebraska, where it was very sort of sparse. This is not that sparse sound, but it's like Nebraska in the sense that a lot of the stories he's telling are not particularly pleasant stories for the characters in them. But definitely that poetry and that lyricism is still there.
Yeah, the hardships and dark realities of the American working class.
Yeah.
Things that, he would learn that, this is... I wouldn't say that really wasn't, quote unquote, his audience, but that was the reality that was around him. Living where he did in the Northeast and watching that all fall apart.
It was like a bad episode of Roseanne. Sorry.
Pre-racism.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a good, solid album. Like, I'm not taking anything away from the album.
No, it is a good album.
It's just, if all you know from Springsteen is Born to Run, brace yourself, because this one's a little bit different.
I was going to say that the biggest difference to me was just the tone, and the tone is darker, which goes, with the whole overall, I guess that's the theme he wanted? I don't know.
And the band, of course, is solid as per the usual.
Always.
Of course.
I mean, we'll repeat ourselves when it comes to Bruce Springsteen and the Street Band. It's all about the lyrics, and it's all about how tight, just amazing that band is working together.
Oh, yeah. Those guys are just tight as hell.
I wrote down, I think, I didn't write which song it was, but in it he's like, poor man wanna be rich, rich man wanna be king, and a king ain't satisfied till he rules everything.
Nice.
He took some of that from Elvis Presley's King of the Whole Wide World. And in that, he said, poor man wants an oyster, rich man wants the pearl, and rich man wants a princess, poor man just wants a girl. So he was also paying homage and making reference to other artists that inspired him.
Nice, yes.
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about earlier with Zeppelin, you can only get so far in music before you start bringing in the stuff you listened to growing up and coming into music.
This is true. Any negatives? None. No negatives, apparently.
Well, I mean, it was like we said. This is not what people expect.
Right. It is.
Yeah. When they put on Springsteen, they don't expect this.
You're like, is this Bruce? Really?
Yeah. I don't know if that's a negative, but certainly there are some people that are going to listen to this and not be enthused about it because it's not what they were expecting.
The fact that he gave Because the Night to Patti Smythe, it's like, okay. And Fire, which the Pointer Sisters made so huge.
Although that's not so much a criticism of the album, other than these are great songs. Why'd you leave them off?
Those are amazing songs, and why the fuck did he not do them? God.
But Fire, I could see didn't fit the theme here.
That's true. Yeah, Fire was a little more energetic.
That's a good point. All right, so this is going to be an interesting matchup because we have Darkness on the Edge of Town against After the Gold Rush, and Rolling Stone had these ranked respectively 91 and 90. So, in the opinion of the Rolling Stone editors, these two are damn near the exact same level of quality. I don't know if we're going to come down on the same side of that or not, but
yeah.
Well, I will say with Neil Young, it was a much more concise choice of songs.
Yes,
it flowed so much better. You didn't hit that that low point, that nadir where you're like, oh my God, where are we going with this?
I don't know. I kind of felt like
Southern Man
that.
is the longest song on this album. It drags out a little, but
it does drag out a little, but it is a phenomenal song. I mean, Southern Man. I'm sure most people have heard it, but it's this indictment of the history of slavery and racism in the South. There are a couple of criticisms with it. I mean, Corey, you just named one. It goes on a little too long. And then number two, even Neil has said in recent years that maybe he was painting with too broad a brush and kind of like labeling the entire South as racist, and maybe that wasn't quite fair.
Yeah, but he's not wrong.
Should mention that Scott lives in rural Georgia. But it is a great song. It's a very well done song. It's a well-written song. And that really is... Look, I'm not a huge Neil Young fan, but the dude could write a song. Very, very talented composer, very talented lyric writer. I almost wish he would have resigned himself more to writing songs for other people, because the biggest problem I have with him is his voice more than anything else.
Yeah, same.
In fact, the more folky stuff... Oh, that's the other thing. I tend to like Neil. Neil is equally adept at writing sort of acoustic folk and heavy rock. I tend to like electric Neil more than acoustic Neil, but here on this one, I noticed a lot of the acoustic songs he brought in Stills and Nash and Crosby to do harmonies. He should have done that more because, frankly, Neil Young is a lot more tolerable when you can't hear him singing.
That's true.
When he lets Stills or Nash do the high notes and not him.
Exactly.
Yeah, he could bust out a riff. I mean, I'll give him that, Cinnamon Girl kind of speaks to that. Not on this album, but you know what I mean.
He could bust out a riff, but at the same time, I had down as one of the negatives. He's not a lead guitarist.
No.
He takes these solos, and you just really aren't clear why he's taking the solos, because he just seems to be noodling around on the neck of the guitar. And it's like, it works. It's notes that sound good within the context of the song, but there's nothing particular. It reminds me of everybody who has ever played guitar or knows someone who has played guitar has had the moment where your buddy who plays guitar like wants you to come up to their room to show you like all of the stuff they learned on the guitar, and then you sit there like nodding and smiling politely as they improvise their way through a solo that just is not that goddamn impressive. That's Neil Young taking a solo.
Yes, exactly.
He is much more impressed by himself than anyone else in the room is.
Look what I did, and you're like, oh God, no, kill me.
But overall, it was just, I don't know, kind of boring.
In a lot of respects,
Fuck me, yes.
Yes. There's only one Southern man on this album.
I really wanted to perforate my eardrums at a certain point after the first song.
Yeah, it's like, Neil, sing in your range or just write an album for Stephen Stills.
Yes, exactly.
That would have worked too.
Well, although we'll get when we'll come back when we get to another Neil album later on, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the other thing I would say about this album is, like I said, Neil's equally adept at being a folk artist and a rock artist, but this album sort of can't figure out what it is. There's no sort of overriding theme or context behind it. And a couple of songs are just fucking weird, quite frankly. There's at the end, I think it's right at the end of side 1, there's a song called Till the Morning Comes, and then on side 2 there's a song called Cripple Creek Ferry. Both of them are under 2 minutes long. They just, number one, feel like unfinished ideas. It's like, hey, I came up with something that sounds good. Don't really know where to go with it, so I'll put down the minute that I've worked out and we'll call it a song. The latter one of those, this Cripple Creek Ferry, honestly, it's just fucking stupid. I mean, it's this little story of a ferry going down a river, and then the second verse is about a gambler who playing cards on the ferry and can't stand to lose. And it goes nowhere. It sounds like something that was written for like a Kids Bop sing-along song. You could almost picture like a group full of kindergartners singing along with this.
Let's go back to its original format. It was on LP. At that point, people could just lift the needle and flip the album.
True.
Because they were at the end of both sides.
And quite often, filler would make its way into
the center of the record.
Early album format, yeah. Especially with artists like Young or fucking Bruce Springsteen, people like that.
All right, I think we're ready to vote. Dave, you're first.
Yeah, putting aside my personal feelings about Neil, I still have to give it to Bruce here. I just think overall the whole album works a lot better. It's a lot more cohesive.
All right, I'm next, and yeah, I'm going with Bruce. Scott?
Well, let's give him a solid kick in the balls. I go with Bruce. Fuck you, Neil.
Another unanimous vote.
Yep.
And that's a huge upset.
Yes, we have the temerity to take number 91 and make it number 90.
Damn right.
Fuck you, Rolling Stone.
You people clearly didn't know what you were doing. But then again, you're the fuckers that put 7 Kanye albums on there, so really go fuck yourselves.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, true.
I'm just saying.
Hello again. This is post-production Corey. And I have made the executive decision to cut this show in half. Because yes, we did fangirl a lot about Led Zeppelin. So, you're welcome. See you next time.